So this video is on Chapter 11, D-Day number 1. I want you to use this as a reference for problems that you're stuck on, and not just to complete your assignment. I want you to try them again, and then if you're stuck or you want to check your answers, then come and fast forward to whatever part of the video you need. Okay, so on number 1. We are adding fractions, and when you add fractions, you need to get a common denominator. And so when I'm trying to get a common denominator here, I am going to need to have an x minus 3 in my denominator. And I'm going to have this x plus 1 in my denominator. So my common denominator is going to be x minus 3 and x plus 1. And so I am going to need to multiply this first fraction by x plus 1 because it's missing that. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by that. The other side is missing the x minus 3. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom of that by x minus 3. And it needs to multiply this whole quantity. Okay. So when I'm dealing with the first fraction and I multiply top and bottom by x plus 1 on top, I am going to get a 5x plus 5 when I multiply that out. In the second fraction, when I take this x minus 3, x plus 3, and I work that out, you can use a box if you need to and go x minus 3, x plus 3 and work it out. You can do a diamond and put -3 and 3 and work it out. But hopefully you recognize it as a difference of 2 squares. And so again, it is a difference of 2 squares. And so if I was to multiply x plus 3 times x minus 3, I am going to get x squared minus 9. But again, you can use the box or you can use the diamond. So now I'm going to combine like terms here on top. So I'm going to have x squared plus 5x minus 4 over x minus 3, x plus 1. We want to see if it is factorable. And so if we look here, what multiplies to -4 and adds to a 5. Since it's a -4, I'm going to need one of them to be positive, one of them to be negative. There's no way for that to combine and get a 5 if they have to be different signs. So it's not going to be factorable. And so this is your answer. On number 2. So on this one, we are multiplying. So we're going to want to get to factor. We're going to have to give some restrictions. Okay. So if I'm factoring this first one here, this x squared minus 4, that again is a difference of 2 squares. That's going to be an x plus 2, x minus 2. And if I am factoring this denominator, this x squared minus 2x, I can factor out an x from that, and I'm going to get an x minus 2. So let me rewrite this. The first fraction is going to be 10x squared over x plus 2 times x minus 2. And that's going to multiply with, and I'll put parentheses around the top, x plus 2 over x times x minus 2. I'm going to need to give some restrictions. So restrictions, you only care what's going to make your denominator 0. So this right here, that would be x cannot be a -2. This right here, x cannot be +2. This right here, x cannot be 0. And this one is again, x cannot be 2, but we don't need to do that twice. So now we are going to simplify. Okay. And so when I'm simplifying this, I want to see if there's something that I can simplify top and bottom, make ones basically. So in this case, this x plus 2 and this x plus 2, this x with one of these, so that's just going to be an x, not an x squared anymore. And so I am going to end up getting 10x on top over x minus 2 times x minus 2. And that is my answer. Okay, on number 3, we're going to factor all of these. Okay, this one here, if I'm factoring this, so I'm going to do the first fraction in purple, let's say. So I can factor out a 5 and an x from this 5x squared minus 10x. And I'm going to get an x minus 2 over, and then this denominator, 2x squared minus 7x minus 15, you can do a box to diamond. I'm just going to set it up for you. What you would do is you would put your 2x squared here, and you're going to take the negative 15, and it's going to go in this box. And what happens always is these are going to multiply to a negative 30x squared. This diagonal also is going to multiply to a negative 30x squared, just like this. That's always the pattern. Whatever this multiplies to, so does this. But it also has to add to this negative 7x. So since it has to multiply to a negative 30x squared, because that's what I get when I multiply across here in the diagonal, it also has to add to this negative 7x, and that's going to go here. And then you try to figure out what multiplies to a negative 30x squared and adds to a negative 7x, and then stick it in your box. I will do this part as an example, but I personally am not going to be using this method when I'm doing these. So looking at this, I'm thinking that this is going to be a negative 10x and a 3x. And so I'll put a negative 10x and a 3x. And then I want to figure out the outside. So to figure out the outside, I always want to start with my 2x squared. And that's going to be a 2x and an x. And the 2x can't go here because it can't get the 3x. So the 2x is going to go here to help get the negative 10x. So, and let me just make that box a little bigger so my negative is inside of it there. Okay, so this is going to be a 2x. And 2x times what gets me 2x squared? Well, 2x times x. And then x times what gets me 3x? Well, that's going to be a plus 3. And 2x times what gets me a negative 10x? And that's going to be a negative 5. So that's going to be your factors, okay? And that's how you can do the 6x squared plus 7x minus 3 also. Now, this is how I personally would do it, is I know I'm going to get 2 parentheses. And I know that since this is a 2x squared, one of these is going to be a 2x and one of them is going to be x. So let's say that this is my 2x and this is my x. I also know I have a negative 15 here, which could be a 15 and a 1 positive, 1 negative, or a 3 and a 5. I'm leaning closer to the 3 and the 5, and I'm trying to get a 7. So I am thinking that if I put a negative 5 here, these would multiply together and get a negative 5x. And then if I put, again, I'm trying to get a negative 15, so a negative 5 and a positive 3. And so if I multiply these together, I get a 3x. So a negative 10x and a 3x does make the 7x. So that's personally how I would have factored this, okay? I'm going to get rid of this right now, so I have some room here. Okay, so I'm going to do the other one in orange. So the other fraction, I have a 6x squared plus 7x minus 3, and I need to figure out what are going to be factors here. I'm thinking since this is a 6x squared, it could be a 6x and an x, or a 2x and a 3x. I'm leaning towards a 2x and a 3x. Why? Because of this. Maybe they'll cancel out. Maybe I have a 2x plus 3 here. Does that work? So I'm going to see if that happens. So I'm going to put the plus 3 here again because I also have to multiply to a negative 3. So I'll put my 3 here, which means I'll put my negative 1 here. And then let's just make sure that we do get what we want. We want to get a 7. So if I multiply these together here, this is going to give me a negative 2x. And if I multiply these together, that's going to give me a 9x, and a negative 2x and a 9x does make a 7x. But again, you can do your box, the diamond, if you prefer. Okay, so now the bottom of this 25x minus 50, I can take 25 from both of them. So I'm going to factor out 25, and I'm going to get an x minus 1. Okay, so that works out for us like that. So now I'm going to give restrictions. Oh, and sorry, it's not a minus 1, it's a minus, I apologize. This is a 25x and a 50, so this should be a minus 2. Minus 2, so we put a minus 2 there. Okay, so now I do need to give some restrictions. So restrictions, it's everything that's going to make my denominator 0. So here, if I set that equal to 0 and I worked it out, x cannot be a negative 3/2. If I set this equal to 0, x cannot be 5. The 25 is a 25. You can't change that. So you aren't going to have a restriction for that. And then this x minus 2 is going to be a 2. So those are going to be our restrictions. Okay. Okay. So now let's see if we can simplify this. So I've got a 2x plus 3 and a 2x plus 3. I have an x minus 2 and an x minus 2. I have a 5 that can go into 25 5 times. And then I think that's all I can do in terms of simplifying. So on top, I'm going to have an x from here and a 3x minus 1. On bottom, I'm going to have an x minus 5 and a 5. So I'm going to write it as a 5 times x minus 5. And that's your answer. So on number 4, this is a minus, okay? So I personally would take this minus and rewrite it as plus a negative and put that negative like that. So again, it was a minus, and I'm going to change that minus to plus a negative, and you want to put parentheses around that. Okay, so now I am going to try to get a common denominator. So I need a factor. So this first one, if I'm factoring this first one, what multiplies to negative 18 and adds to a 3? Well, that's going to be an x minus plus 6, sorry, and an x minus 3. And then in the other fraction, what multiplies to a negative 12 and adds to a 4? So that's going to be an x plus 6 and an x minus 2. So for my common denominator, from my first fraction, I need an x plus 6 and an x minus 3. So I need an x plus 6 and an x minus 3. From the other denominator, I need an x plus 6 and an x plus minus 2, but I already have the x plus 6. I don't need to list it again. So the thing that I'm missing is that x minus 2. And this is going to be my common denominator. So for my first fraction here, I am missing the x minus 2. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by x minus 2. Okay, so I'm going to multiply this by x minus 2 and this by x minus 2. And then on the other side, I am missing this x minus 3. That's not here. So I'm going to multiply this by x minus 3 and this by x minus 3. And then I'm going to clean that up. So in this first fraction up here, the numerator, I'm going to get a 2x minus 4. And then in the other numerator, I am going to work out this, let me highlight it. I'm going to work out this. And so to work that out, you can do a box, but you can also think of it as a diamond. I'm just going to jot it over here. You have a -3 and a 1. So what do those add to? Well, that's -2. What do they multiply to? -3. So that, and I'm going to write it right above it, is going to be, and I have a negative in front of it, x squared minus 2x minus 3. So now I'm going to distribute that negative. So I'm going to get a -x squared plus 2x plus 3. And then I'm going to clean that up. So when I clean this up, I've got a -x squared. My x's, I have a 2x and a 2x, which is going to make a 4x. And then I have a -4 and a 3, which makes a -1. And we could try to factor that, but that's not going to be factorable. So I'm going to have -x squared plus 4x minus 1 times x plus 6 times x minus 3 times x minus 2. And that is our answer. So on number 5, this is another adding one. These have monomials, okay? So I'm going to be looking at this, and I'm going to be looking at this. So when we have monomials like this, what you're really looking to see is, let's look at the numbers. Well, I need a 3 from the first one, and I need a 2 from the second one. So that's going to make a 6 total. From the first fraction, I need an x squared. From the second fraction, I need an x. Well, I already have the x. If you have more than what you need, you don't need to add this in. So since I have an x squared, that's going to more than carry this x. Now I also need this y, because this one has no y. And so that's going to be my common denominator. It's going to be basically, if I clean this up, is going to be 6x squared y. And so I am going to multiply this side by a 2y. And the other side, I'm missing a 3 and an x. And so when I do that math, I'm going to get a 10y plus 21x. And so let's see, I think I'm going to write my 21x first and then my 10y. It doesn't matter. I can't divide anything from every number. I don't have an x in everything. I don't have a y in everything. So that's your answer. On number 6, this is a division. So what I'm going to do here in a second is this is going to be flipped. It's going to become multiplied by that reciprocal. But let's first factor the first fraction here. So this x squared plus 6x plus 8, what multiplies to 8 and adds to 6? Well, that's a 2 and a 4. On the bottom, what multiplies to a negative 5 and adds to a 4? Well, that's going to be an x plus 5 and an x minus 1. Divided by, and let me keep this as is at first. So here, what multiplies to a 4 and adds to a 4? So that's going to be an x plus 2 squared, or x plus 2x plus 2. My denominator, I have a 3 I can factor out, and I'm going to get an x plus 5. So I'm going to need to do restrictions. And so in my purple denominator, x cannot be a -5 or a 1. In my orange denominator, again, it can't be also a -5. The 3 is not going to affect anything. And then I'm going to have to rewrite this. I'm going to flip it. So again, I'm only flipping the one that's orange, the ones after my division. So this is going to still be an x plus 2, x plus 4. This is going to be an x plus 5 times x minus 1 times And then again, I'm going to flip the orange one. So my 3 times x plus 5 comes on top. And on bottom, I'm going to have an x plus 2, x plus 2, which means I have another restriction, -2. X cannot be -2. And so now when I'm simplifying this, I end up having, let's see, this x plus 5, this x plus 5. I have an x plus 2 and an x plus 2. And that looks like everything I can cancel out. So I am going to get a 3 times x plus 4. And let's see, on bottom, I'm going to get an x minus 1 times x plus 2. And you can leave it like that. You don't have to multiply it out, because here I see nothing can be factored. On number 7, again, we're practicing adding these. We need to factor our denominators and then try to get a common denominator. So my first one, I can factor out a 3 and I get an x plus 3. In my second one, that is a difference of 2 squares, x squared minus 9. It is an x plus 3 times x minus 3. And so my common denominator from my purple fraction, I'm going to have a 3 and an x plus 3. Now, if I have a number, sometimes you want to check on top to see if that can simplify. Sometimes it can. In this case, it can't. Then from my orange one, I need an x plus 3, but I already got it, so I don't need to add that one on. But I do need the x minus 3. So this is going to be my common denominator. So I am going to be multiplying this side by what it's missing, which is an x minus 3. And the other side, I'm missing a 3. So I'm going to times it by 3, times it by 3. So on top, I'm going to get a 2x minus 6 when I distribute. And then I'm going to get also a plus 15x. I'm going to combine like terms. So I'm going to get a 17x minus 6, which is not factorable. And then I have a 3 in x plus 3 in x minus 3. And that is your answer. So on number 8, this one is a multiplication. And I can do a little factoring on some of these. This and this are monomial, so I can't factor them. Maybe I can cancel things, but I can't factor them. So in my first fraction, let me do that one in blue. I can factor out a 5 and I get an x plus 2. And I'm going to see, I might simplify that because I also notice I have a 25 on top. So that 5 and 25 can cancel. But let's see what happens with, let me just finish this other side. So on this other side, I'm going to do it in purple. I have a 2x squared minus 8. I'm actually going to write it right above for a second. So that's going to be a 2 times x squared times x squared minus 4. And then I can factor that. So this here is going to be hold on a second. Let me move this up. So this was an x squared. So that means this is going to be a 2 times x plus 2, x minus 2. And I can't clean the bottom up. So if I rewrite this, I am going to have my 25x squared y and my 5 times x plus 2. And from the other fraction, I have a 2 times x plus 2 times x minus 2. And let's see, bottom, we get a 10xy cubed. Restrictions on this. I I'm going to have for x and y in this case. So x cannot be a -2 because of this. The 5 is a 5, it's not going to change. The 10 is a 10, it's not going to change. This x cannot be 0. This y means that y cannot be 0. So now let's see if we can simplify some things. So it looks like I have an x plus 2, x plus 2. I can take this 5 into 25, which leaves me with a 5. And then I can actually simplify. I'm going to do this in orange. I can simplify this 5 and 2 with that 10. So that's all gone. Let's see. I also have this x with this, so I get just an x. This y with this, so this is actually going to be a y squared. And then if I rewrite that, on top I have an x and an x minus 2. On bottom I have a y squared, and that's your answer. On the next one, these are the ones where we're trying to solve. We're trying to factor and try to get rid of all of my denominators. So this first one is a p times p plus 1. I can factor that out. This one here is also a p times p plus 1. And then this one here is a p plus 1. So let me just rewrite this. I am going to take my p plus 5 over p times p plus 1. And I'm going to multiply that by something here in a second. And my 1 over p times p plus 1. And then that minus here, this minus, I'm going to change it to plus a negative. And that's going to be a p minus 6 over p plus 1. So I want to get rid of this p plus 1. Again, here's another p and p plus 1, and here's a p plus 1. So I'm going to multiply everything by p times p plus 1. Okay, times it by p times p plus 1, times it by p times p plus 1. And our goal is to get rid of our denominator. So this p and p, this p plus 1, this p plus 1. On the other fraction, this p, this p, this p plus 1, this p plus 1. Over here, the p plus 1 and p plus 1. And now I have no denominator, so I'm going to be left with p plus 5 is equal to 1. And then I'm going to have a negative p here that's going to distribute. So I'm going to get a negative p squared. Negative times negative is a plus 6p. And I'm going to solve this. So I'm going to bring my p squared over here because I like it to be positive. I'm also going to minus 6p, so I get a negative 5p. I'm also going to minus 1, so I get a plus 4 equals 0. And so I want to think about what multiplies to a positive 4 and adds to a negative 5, and that's going to be a p minus 1 and a p minus 4. And I forgot to give restrictions up here before I finish with my answer. We want to make sure we don't get any restrictions. So my restrictions are going to be p cannot be 0 and p cannot be negative 1. 0 because of this, negative 1 because of this. Okay, so when I'm solving this, my p minus 1, that's going to be p equals 1. My p minus 4, that's going to be p equal 4. And again, if I'm looking up here, that's a negative 1 and a 0. This is a positive 1 and a 4. So those are okay, and that's your answer. On number 10, Again, similar idea. We're going to factor out the x from this. And over here, I do have an x. So if I'm writing this, I'm going to have 1 over x times x plus 2 plus x minus 1 over x equals 1. And I need to get rid of an x plus 2 and an x. So I'm going to multiply everything by x times x plus 2, x times x plus 2, x times x plus 2. And I can simplify this x and this x and this x plus 2 and this x plus 2. And again, I need to give my restrictions. So my restrictions, forgot to, always remember to start with those. X cannot be 0 and x cannot be -2. So this x and this x are going to cancel out. And then I'm going to end up getting 1 plus, and here I'm going to have an x minus 1 times an x plus 2, which I'm going to multiply out here in a sec. And I'm going to have an x squared plus 2x. And so when I multiply the x minus 1 times x minus x plus 2, -1 and 2 add to a -1, so I'm going to get a negative x. They multiply to a -2, so I get a -2. X squared plus 2x. I'm going to subtract x squared from both sides. And when I do that, I'm going to get